What is going on in the cryptoverse? We've seen some of the biggest names in the business admit to criminal activity, with exchange Binance recently being fined $4 billion, and yet Bitcoin's value has just hit its highest level in a year and a half. Well, to get to grips with the state of play with cryptocurrencies, I'm joined by Sam Kessler from the crypto news website CoinDesk. Thanks a lot for being with us, Sam. Let's start by talking about Bitcoin, actually, because it's regained a lot of ground in 2023. It's up 150% on the start of the year, but that follows some serious volatility over the last 3 years following its pandemic peak. So, Sam, what's been driving up Bitcoin in recent months?
Yeah, like you mentioned, this is the highest price that we've seen for Bitcoin in the past year, really year and a half. So it's past $40,000 for some context. At the beginning of this year, the price of Bitcoin was around $16,000 US. So it's more than doubled. In this specific instance, we can actually point to a pretty obvious catalyst for why the price has gone up in the way that it has. And that's because there is the potential and the probability, it seems, that the U.S. Regulators will approve a spot ETF application, or a series of them, which would essentially allow people to buy and sell Bitcoin through regular brokerages like they would a stock.
Yeah, so this would be an ETF where it sort of collected a load of different coins together and people were able to invest in that, supposedly taking some of the volatility out of it. So why are crypto traders so excited about that prospect?
Yeah, so I think the reason why people are so excited about this is because of that kind of stock-like thing. So there's a lot of things that become a ton easier once you are trading Bitcoin via an ETF, because first, like I mentioned, you can do it through your brokerage. Second, it's just a lot easier and less scary than having to set up a crypto wallet. That's at least the presumption that people are buying Bitcoin on, is that more people will trade as a result of this much more easy to use investment vehicle. The other thing is that financial advisors who've been kind of skittish about Bitcoin in the past and about cryptocurrencies writ large will be able to just very easily add it to client portfolios. And also they can add it to like tax advantaged accounts like retirement accounts, which again is something that's been a lot more difficult to do historically. So altogether, the reason why people are investing in it now is because they think, it seems like, or they seem to think that more people are going to buy as a result of this ETF thing. But also, this is still a super volatile asset. The spike in price is only more evidence of that. And there's no telling whether all of this anticipation around the ETF will lead to a sustained increase in the price of Bitcoin.
And the reason that people think that these ETFs are, on the way, although this has been rolling on for a few months now, I had a very similar conversation to this before. I'm getting a little bit of deja vu, is that the regulators in the US, the SEC, look like they're going to approve the very first one. I think what people will wonder is if this is essentially cryptos getting, the backing to some extent of financial regulators, doesn't that kind of go against the whole ethos of crypto, or why this all started? They were supposed to exist outside of the standard structures of investment. Yeah.
It's super weird, isn't it? I completely agree. So like Bitcoin specifically, the first blockchain came about in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. It was viewed, to varying degrees as, an inflation hedge. It was viewed as this thing that was supposed to exist independent from our existing financial ecosystem. It was supposed to be unregulated, uncensorable, decentralized, and not saying that all of this is an affront completely to all of that. But also what we're seeing is just the simple fact that people, the market, now that they have kind of, it seems like decided that Bitcoin is a legitimate or investment-worthy asset, they seem more than happy, even some of the biggest names in the space from the early days, to kind of see the price increase with all of this institutional adoption. Just one more note here is the reason why this SEC, ruling is expected soon, this ruling from the Securities and Exchange Commission, is because BlackRock, which is one of the biggest financial firms in the United States globally, which has only had an ETF application denied once out of more than 500, filed back in November. And that's where the deadline is coming from. The SEC has to let them know if they're going to approve the application soon. And at least like Bloomberg analysts are predicting that it's 90% going to happen. So Anyway,
Right.
yeah, it is really weird. Agreed.
Yeah, because it will be seen by some as a legitimization of Bitcoin to some extent, right? Which is actually the complete opposite of what some people are calling for. I mean, I was just reading a quote from the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon. He thinks that the US government should basically outlaw cryptocurrencies. What did he say? He said, the only true use case is for criminals, drug traffickers, money laundering, and tax avoidance. Is he the only one that thinks that, or is there any momentum behind the idea of actually not trying to control them, actually just trying to shut them down?
Yeah, I mean, there is momentum behind that idea. Most notably, at least the SEC, hasn't necessarily, tried to say that all of it should be shut down and made illegal, but they want to treat these things as securities, essentially saying that people are dishonest in the way that they present certain kinds of tokens, where they're actually like investment vehicles that look more like stocks rather than these sort of amorphous, decentralized tokens. But anyway, the reason why that quote that you mentioned and that opinion that it represents has so much sway is because, like you've kind of alluded to at the top of this segment, we've seen, especially over the past year, just a many months long saga of exchange collapses, allegations of impropriety, along with tons of criminal charges, arrests, fines, so that idea certainly has sway, rightfully or wrongfully.
Yeah, that's absolutely what we should get on to talking about now, actually. So 2023, has seen the law catch up with the two biggest crypto exchanges, first FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, and now Binance most recently. Actually, would you be able to just remind us what Binance and former CEO Changpeng Zhao, sometimes known as CZ, not CZ as I would normally say it as a British person, what are they admitted to doing?
Yeah. So Binance is still the largest cryptocurrency exchange. It's the largest venue for people to go buy and sell digital currencies. They were kind of cagey about where they were located, but they had kind of an outfit in the United States that prosecutors allege was, fully owned by the international entity. But essentially, the allegation itself is that Binance and that founder, CZ, helped launder billions of dollars to entities, terrorist organizations, and so on, sanctioned by the U.S. government. And Binance pled guilty, paid one of the biggest, certainly the biggest fine in crypto history, one of the biggest fines in DOJ and U.S. Treasury history, over $4 billion to settle an array of criminal and civil charges. And CZ has been forced to step down from his CEO role and could face up to 18 months in prison, but he does retain ownership of the company. We can talk about whether this is a good or a bad thing for crypto writ large, but it's a big deal.
Well, go on, let's talk about that. I mean, is this a good or bad thing for crypto at large?
Yeah. So on one hand, it's obviously a bad look for the biggest exchange, arguably the biggest company in crypto, to be charged with one of the biggest fines in U.S. Corporate
and
crime
it's enormous
history.
When you think about everything that's tied in with, the allegations of allowing the funding of terrorist groups.
Yeah.
And this is not small fry, but yet it seems like Binance is going to weather this in a way that FTX clearly didn't.
Exactly. So, I attributed that rise in the price of Bitcoin largely to that ETF thing. But one of the reasons why we're probably seeing the price in Bitcoin go up is because Binance has had allegations against it since almost the time it was born in 2017, 2018 timeframe. It's been investigated. There's been, scoops from journalists about that. And so people were expecting, because of how shadowy the operations of this organization have been historically, they've been expecting some sort of penalty to come down that could rattle the entire space, similar to those FTX, the FTX debacle, to put it lightly, from last year. And now that they've paid this fine, that CZ has pleaded guilty, even though that's a bad look for Binance, like I was saying. People hope that this kind of saga of exchange collapses is behind them. People hope that Binance can continue operating, or at least the crypto space can continue operating without this looming threat hanging over it like it's been for years.
Yeah, that's it, right? There's something that's been hanging over them has now dropped. And actually we find, if you pay attention to markets and to cryptocurrencies, that what seems like very bad news is not bad news necessarily for a share price or for the value of a coin. An interesting story over the last couple of days has been the Russian founder of an exchange called BitZlato. The founder's name is Anatoly Lekodimov, but he's known as Gandalf. I looked for a picture of him, and he doesn't have a big beard, so I'm not entirely sure why he's called that. But he's admitted accepting illicit funds. Essentially, this exchange was being used to help fund criminal activity. I mean, how can crypto investors actually have any confidence that the exchanges that they're using, isn't being used for something nefarious?
Yeah, so just to kind of underscore some of that, the Russian founder of a Hong Kong-based crypto exchange was arrested in Florida, which kind of just shows how global this entire ecosystem is and how hard it is to kind of get your head around. But he pleaded guilty to operating an unlicensed money transmitter, and there were allegations that they helped process funds specifically related to ransomware attacks. So how do you know that your money is not being used for this stuff? Well, in this specific case, I imagine that the people who are using this exchange, which is, I honestly had not heard of it. I'm reporting on this space. I hadn't heard of it until these allegations, these charges were raised. But one imagines that people who are using this specifically for money laundering or whatever is alleged knew that they were doing that. Just buying Bitcoin does not necessarily mean that you are, perpetrating a fraud, at least under, it seems, current regulations. But
despite what the head of JP Morgan Chase says as well. I mean, there obviously are people who are not committing criminal activity. when they buy Bitcoin, clearly that's the case. So 2023 has really been all over the place. What should we keep an eye out for in 2024? Do we expect to see Bitcoin continue its rise? And now I don't want you to be giving out, investment tips here, of course. But what are the key things that you guys at CoinDesk are going to be keeping an eye on over the next 12 months?
Yeah, so I'm not really a markets reporter. I'm a technology reporter. And something interesting here to note is that the pump in the rise of Bitcoin specifically and some associated assets, like I mentioned, has had to do a lot with this ETF news and speculation around the approvals. But it doesn't, in this case, have as much to do around core technology like we saw in the past bull run around NFTs, decentralized finance, and so on, all of these sort of the metaverse buzzwords that were associated with the core technology itself rather than this new kind of investment vehicle. So what we might see on the technology side that could lead to a sustained increase or marriage between traditional and decentralized or crypto finance is more off-chain real-world assets, stocks, bonds, and so on, getting the sort of regulatory approval and technical, all of the nuances figured out to get those onto blockchains. That could weave the two financial systems together and potentially lead to an increase in the rise of this stuff. You could also see regulations just being clearer in the United States and abroad. We talk about the United States because I'm based here and that's what I focus on the most. And, there's also, EU's MiCA regulations. Whatever happens with crypto in China, like this all has an influence, but it might go down. Like it's really impossible to speculate.
Well, we won't try, but Sam Kessler from CoinDesk, thank you very much for trying to look into your crystal ball for us and also for bringing us your expertise here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure. And that's all from this DW Business look at the spectacular rise of Bitcoin over the past year, despite the emergence of various scandals. There's plenty more from us here on the DW News YouTube channel, so maybe we'll see you over at the next video.